It would take a Palestinian 181 years to leave. In other words, it is a complete prison that people live in. And no amount of assurances by Israel that they will lift the siege can be trusted whatsoever. They're asking for the ability to run their own affairs, i.e. Palestine. And here, this is quite important. We're not talking about Gaza sort of cutting itself off the West Bank, but they want to have an airport. They want to have to be able to sail and to fish and to import things and export them, live like any other human beings. And of course, the critical point is the Israelis do not see it. The Israelis think the only way to deal with the Palestinians is through violence. And by that, I mean not just the government, but also Israeli society. They think might is right. We can keep these people under the thumb and we can carry on as normal, sitting on the beaches of Tel Aviv in bikinis.
But Mr. Hawash, certainly you can accept that there must be some sort of complicity on the part of these many of these Arab countries. As our correspondent was saying, Egypt has played quite an interesting role behind the scenes by not opening the Rafah crossing. It's opened it for those rare moments where some critically injured were allowed through. But certainly it can do a lot to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, can it not?
Well, again, it's not just about alleviating suffering. It's not about humanitarian things, which people talk about. This is about allowing people to live a normal life. Would they close the border with Sudan? Would they close the border with Libya and then make sure that people can't come out, can't go?
It seems that we might have lost our connection there with Mr. Hawashi. We'll try to get him back on if we can. Professor Dana, I'd like to get back to you, if I may, and ask you as well about the Arab role or lack of, and their complicity, where it seems. Many Gazans, even as our correspondent is saying, believe that the Arab world has essentially remained silent and is not even supporting this very logical ceasefire demands and conditions, which, as you said, are pretty logical as well, of course, put forth by Hamas.
Yeah, I totally agree with this, but I just want to note one more thing, basically, that for the audience who are watching this, that we're not really here talking about basic human rights, really. We're talking about a colonial venture, one of the last actually colonial venture in this world, where people have been colonized and every aspect of their life has been placed under control. So what the Palestinians are facing is exactly what the people of South Africa have faced before, what the rest of the people of the third world have faced before. All colonial ventures in the world ended, and the last one is that of the Zionist entity in Palestine. Now, back to the complicity of the Arab regimes. Of course, there is a strong complicity in this situation, and some of the Arab regimes who are directly involved in this issue, specifically the Egyptian regime, are actually part of the war on the Palestinian people and part of the war on the Palestinian resistance. So the Palestinians are fighting really not on one front; they're fighting the military front against Israel, or trying actually to defend themselves as much as they can against Israel's military aggression. But also diplomatically and politically, they've been facing the Palestinian Authority. Really, Mahmoud Abbas has been trying to accept it, really, and actually was marketing the truce agreement that was actually written basically by Israel's security apparatus. The Egyptian regime has been doing essentially the same. And it's really again, fascinating, surprising as well, that while John Kerry, the Secretary of State, came to save Israel, Israel is desperate at this point because they are unable to achieve any military success on the ground, facing the resistance, excepting, of course, killing children and women. That the Egyptian regime has been insisting that this is the agreement, take it or leave it. And the agreement basically does not state even the basic things, lifting the siege on Gaza, or actually opening the border crossing points, and things of that nature. All what they're asking for is a truce for a truce. And that's actually would essentially mean legitimizing Israel's continuous aggression on the Palestinians. The daily war crimes that Israel is committing against the Palestinians, they are asked now to legitimize that and to accept it as something normal, which the Palestinians are not really willing to take and are not willing to accept. So in November of 2012, I have to repeat that again, Israel agreed that the truce agreement will include lifting the siege on Gaza. From that time on, they did not lift the siege on Gaza, and they continued their attacks on Gaza on a daily basis.
Right.
Now,
I do apologize once again, Professor, but I just want to bring in our other guest. He's joining us once again, Mr. Kamil Hawash. Mr. Hawash, you were speaking there about Egypt, so I'd like to continue, of course, about that. And secondly, I wanted to ask you also, Mr. Hawash, are we then seeing the beginning of the end of this siege on Gaza, considering, of course, like I said, Hamas is standing quite steadfastly by this one condition?
Well, I mean, it started to impact on the Palestinian Authority, which is now talking about the same conditions that Hamas is requesting. So there is a change there. What we need, and today the British Foreign Secretary, the new Foreign Secretary, was in Palestine and Israel, and he should be saying to the Israelis, without any doubt, that the way to end this is to end the siege. Because nobody, including the so-called international community, wants this to flare up again very soon. And the only way that's going to end is through three things. One, Israel stops the bombing. Two, it lifts the siege. And three, there's a resolution that ends the occupation and allows the Palestinian refugees to come back. So I think, although there may not be a lifting of the siege immediately, the Netanyahu strategy has failed completely. The rockets are still flying. Tel Aviv airport is closed. They're losing soldiers in their tents now. So he's, as my colleague said, looking for a way out. But the way out is to end the siege and to end the occupation.
And on that one point about Mahmoud Abbas, Mr. Hawash, I wanted to ask you, how significant is it that he has in fact sided with Hamas on these ceasefire conditions? Because, you know, at the beginning it did seem when this aggression first began on Gaza that there was that divide in the way the two parties were seeing the situation.
Well, I think it's a very positive development, and I think Khalid Mish'al and these people in Gaza have welcomed it. He was asked to touch with the people when he decided to secure a deal supposedly through Egypt, but without talking to the main party that runs Gaza. He admits in interviews that at the moment, although there's a unity government, Hamas runs Gaza. So how on earth do you expect to secure a ceasefire if you're not talking to the party, the main party? Of course, there are other parties there. So I think it is significant that these have to change, and the PLO, if you like, as a whole, is now aligned with the Palestinian resistance in saying, at the very basic level, the siege must end, and that we must then, the international community must say to Israel, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Get out of the occupied territories and allow the Palestinians to return to their homes so that there can be peace and people can deal with other issues.
Right, and on that point, Professor Dana, I wanted to give you the final thoughts, some of the final thoughts from you about this issue of Mahmoud Abbas as well, now siding with Hamas when it comes to the ceasefire.
Well, as my colleague said, it's a positive development, but I don't think Mahmoud Abbas had an option. The Palestinian street, actually, and the public opinion in Palestine and the Arab world is forcing Mahmoud Abbas to do this. And I think Fatah also, the other party in Palestine, is realizing that they're losing everything. They're losing grounds in the West Bank if they continue with the same old negotiation-only policy, siding against resistance. And they have been siding against resistance, basically, for a very long time. So I think Mahmoud Abbas did change, at least the discourse changed, but simply because he had no option.
And Mr. Hawash, then I wanted to ask you then going forward, at this point, you know, we're seeing these numbers, of course, rising when it comes to these civilians who are being killed. This time it's 695, 136, I believe, children amongst that. Are we seeing the beginning of the end when it comes to at least this Israeli aggression on Gaza?
I don't think so. I think Israel is a violent country. It is a country which does not understand that by oppression and violence and killing and maiming, you can survive as a state, because people are beginning to turn against it. It's becoming more and more isolated. It's facing boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So it has a military mind that drives its politics, and that needs to change. And it's only going to change when the Israeli people wake up one morning and realize that actually they cannot continue like this. The status quo isn't sustainable, and the only way to do this is to acknowledge the wrong that was done in 1948, to sit down with the Palestinians and talk about genuine peace and reconciliation, and not what they want, which is a quiet occupation.
Okay, we'll leave it there for now, but of course we do sincerely appreciate both of your insights. That was Mr. Kamel Hawash speaking to us live via London, and he's the Vice Chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and we were of course also joined by Professor Saif Dana, who is an Associate Professor at the University of Wisconsin, who is speaking to us live via Skype from Wisconsin. As I said, gentlemen, we do appreciate your insight. Of course, we will be following very closely the continuing Israeli aggression on Gaza. At this point, as you can see on your screen, there's 695 is the number of people killed in Gaza, a large percentage of that being civilians, a large percentage of those civilians as well being children and the elderly. Do stay tuned to Press TV for the latest on that.